for us is why we've doubled down so much on emotional experiences. That is something that we feel is something that will continue to be relevant.
Welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Fitz, and I got my co-host over here.
And I'm Sean, guys. And we're actually joined today with an awesome, very awesome guest, Jim Pietruszynski. He's the CEO of Soulsight. He comes with over 3 decades of design and strategy experience in the branding world. And he's worked with such clients as Coca-Cola, Heinz, Pfizer. You know, the list goes on and on. He comes with a lot of experience. Thanks, Jim, for joining us. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me. So I'll back up a little bit in terms of like where I started my professional career, because I think that helps a little bit in context to how we made the leap to, be able to knock on doors of Fortune 100 companies. But so I started as a graphic designer right out of school. Needed a job right away to pay back. I paid for school myself, so like going in and with a ridiculous amount of debt for a junior designer salary, is super intimidating. So my ambition was to be financially secure at some point in my life and not have to worry about, and think about the creative and not have to always worry about the, when and how I'm going to pay the next bill. So I started working at a company that worked with larger brands, which no longer exists. That was in Chicago. And they were described as a package design company. So at the time, there was many different types of package design companies that were really focused on packaging as the front and center. And I still believe that packaging is an archetype for brands. And we can talk a little bit more about what I mean by the word brand. I quickly realized, hey, this is a world I'm really interested in. There's a large audience. There's a big impact on culture. There's a big impact on, where we can go and what we can do with this, and quickly moved to another company, which was one of the largest package design agencies in the U.S. And both of these companies don't exist anymore. So one was actually around for 30 plus. They both were around for 30 plus years, but they've since sunsetted. But in the process of moving from like a mid-size agency to a very large agency with multiple offices, kind of felt a little bit more like where's my place and where's my voice, and like, how do I feel like I'm really adding value instead of just like cranking out creative. I remember working like 60 or 70-hour weeks. I didn't mind it. I love the work, and I would, again, I needed to pay off the bills, but like it was exciting in a different way that I was able to jump in and work on projects at that larger agency like Coca-Cola, and get the experience of working with Kraft Heinz and, some of the larger players in the market. One of the women that I worked with at that company, she was leading, multi-million-dollar accounts and also a designer at one point, but was functioning more as an account manager. And she just, at some point she said that, that like, this is not fulfilling for me anymore. Like, I think that we can be more effective, like kind of flipping the coin as more of a boutique package design agency that goes after mid-level companies to really have some more impact and have some more way of like really producing great work. So that's how Soulsight was born, was, let's do something different. And at the time it was exciting to me. I was considering switching jobs, and I thought, let's give this a try. It's small, there will be some impact that I'll be able to feel like I'm adding value. And so for about 10 years, we did, mid-sized companies, things that are in the market, but not the big guys. I would say, a lot more middle market and a lot more niche. And we still had that experience of working with larger Fortune 100 companies. So we were using some of the discipline that we learned there with the mid-sized companies. And then, it was interesting working with a more boutique agency, more as a boutique agency, where you learn a style that is more intimate and more of a partnership. Thought, well, how do we, as we were growing, how do we flip that idea of relationship and partnership and creating empathy and understanding and working with other people to larger companies. Like we never wanted to be the company that's going to come in there and say, take it or leave it. Like it's always, we wanted to be the agency that came in and said, let's build a relationship. Let's work together. I'm part of your team. You're part of our team. And we had some opportunities with some old contacts. So the people that went from those mid-level companies, you meet associate brand managers that get promoted throughout their career. If you are doing good work with them, you build great relationships with them. They remember you. And so we started calling on, people at those mid-sized companies that we had good relationships with that were now at like Fortune 100 companies. So it was all relationship based getting in the door. It took a number of years to prove that we could handle the volume of work and the pace of the work that we needed to move forward with. And heavily I would say like the adding to the staff or adding or building our team. We really scrutinized who was joining and making sure that they were on board. For one, like we wear a lot of hats. There's a lot of value that you're going to have to add. And we're always going to be in a constant and evolving role. Yeah. So a lot of it is so I say we hire a lot of like self-motivated people who are, looking for opportunities to continue to their growth and continue to learn. So now that we've worked with these, after 20 years of working with a lot of these larger companies, there's a confidence that goes into like, of course, like once you have something in your portfolio, it's easier to like get a call answered or get in the door or have a capabilities that somehow relates to where you're going or what you're doing. So that's how we ended up, working with these larger companies. I think it's one thing
Gotcha.
that we're not, we've been told this, like Soulsight, you're the best kept secret because we compete against global companies for similar projects, but we are really just one head office in Chicago with remote workers across the country. Thankfully, we're able to find some great creatives now that we are not limited to like one geographical area. And but what we don't do a good job at is PR or self-promotion. And like even if you were to look at our website today, that work is 3 or 4 years old because it's the last thing when you get busy doing client work, the last thing that happens is we start focusing on what we need to do ourselves. We're getting better at it. We're making more of an effort. We're making more of a push. But it's an investment, right? It's always an investment, and you don't know how the investment's going to turn out on the other end. And it's a choiceful investment of your time to make sure that you're spending it in the right ways, and client work is not getting sacrificed for agency work. I think one thing that so there's two different types of agencies that we see in our space. There's agencies that come in that are you're looking for their style or the type of work that they do. And that, or you're looking for an approach. They're very specific about the output. And I could look at some of the work that are from some of our competitors and say, like, I know who did that without even with just looking at the design work without, reading who did what, where, and how. One thing that we've tried to do is make sure that we don't have, like, I think because of the way that we've developed partnerships, I wouldn't say we have a style. We're working with brand to make sure that the brand expression and the brand experience is unique to the brand. So a lot of that is like, why we haven't submitted into or been featured in a lot of awards is because the reward is seeing these brands grow or seeing these brands do well. The reward is 20-year plus client relationships and tenure, 15-year, 10-year employee retention. Like those are the things that I think build solid ground for us to like continue to move forward. So that if there's a hiccup in the world or in the economy or in the market, like we still have a stable ground. And that was a long answer to a short
Yeah.
and what seemingly is a short and easy question.
Super
It's all
awesome
good.
answer. Yeah, so I mean, obviously a lot of touch points there to touch on. I'll touch on one of the ones that you just recently said, though, because it was definitely the front of mind here. That you do good work, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the award-worthy work. I think I've had the same kind of issue in my career as well, right? Where I don't have that that front-facing. Here's all the awards. Here's all the trophies. Because yeah, my role is always to adapt to what the client needs and what's the best for the client, and that sometimes doesn't mean high design. That doesn't usually sometimes mean the most cutting edge solution. And so it's funny how awards, a lot of people aim for awards, and I think it's correct in not aiming for those, to aim towards having just good work and good relations. Like you said, it's cool that within your talk at multiple different touch points, from starting your own business and all these things, it was all relationship. It was all you knowing somebody and there being trust between that person, right? That seems like that's everything. If you hadn't created trust at each of those touch points, it wouldn't have happened. And so it's interesting. Yeah, creating trust over awards and kind of self-glorification. Super cool.
Yeah, I think the last part of that question that I didn't get to was like, what does it take to become CEO? So there was a number of like, partnership, like myself and a couple of partners brought out the original owner of Soulsight years ago, and then there was a little bit of a rebuild and tremendous growth during that period when that where we were able to take it to the next level. To those two partners that I had have like retired from work. Like they still have equity, but there are retired and non-operating partners. And so like it's funny, like if you would have asked me 30 years ago to do you see yourself as a CEO of a company, I would tell you hell no. Like there's no way that because of the mindset of what a CEO does, again, is so different depending on the character and the way that an environment is structured. So my role, I just read this great book about like, and so I when I took on the role of CEO, I had been a CMO, I had been a creative director, I've been account manager, I've been a strategist, I've been, every role that you need to run an agency. I've even answered the phones when we were first started. Like that's when you would answer phones actually in an office, which doesn't happen anymore.
GMs now.
Yeah, but I think that when we were pushing towards like what does that mean to be a CEO, we have some private equity backing with us too, which has been a tremendous help in just understanding the business of the business and how to like continually to push that growth financially, which I don't have an accounting background. I don't have, a finance background. So like that's something that's been a tremendous value for me as a partner to understand how to keep the legacy of what we've built continue to move and grow. So I read this great book, and it was like the three things that are most important as a CEO. The first thing is culture, the second is people, and the third is business. So like really understanding like what's going on. And I think that there's somewhat of a misconception, at least in what I thought, CEOs were more disconnected from what was going on in the culture, and they were just solely focused on making the numbers and driving business and making sure that we're on budget. But really 2/3 of what I do most of the time is trying to dial into what's happening with the culture and making sure that, we have the people in the right places, because our product, right, in creative is our people. So the human factor becomes so important in how we drive and move and how we continue to move forward. And that again is like a relational thing. So it goes back to the relationship theme.
So I got a question there. Oh, sorry.
Go for it. No, you go for it.
Okay, so we hear now you own a big company, and I sometimes feel like the bigger a company becomes, the less creative they are. So how do you stay creative, especially as a CEO? And you said you were a freelancer, did all the creative work probably in the beginning. And how is that balance now? How do you stay creative? How do you encourage creativity? Because I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's gotten a little bit difficult with like how we work remotely and readjusting
Yeah.
to like being able to see what we were doing. So we have we have teams. I would say that they are somewhat dedicated teams when you get to more of a creative director level that have
Yeah.
more a client relationship, but always open to move teams around so that there's an ability to bring on a different viewpoint or a different frame of mind. There are some people that, and not that we try to like peg people as a certain type of designer, but there's some people that excel in certain
Yeah.
types of work than others, whether it be a brand identity or a beer brand or an innovation project. There's some people that tend to like thrive on different types of creativity, but I think opportunity. It's just like giving the opportunity for people to continue to grow. And I think we define ourselves as a learning organization. So like when you come in, you have to buy onto the fact that we're going to like once you stop learning, like it's time to switch careers, because like in our world, everything is constantly evolving and changing. So there's a lot of like share out of like what's going on. One of the things that we do is, just as an example, is we have and we've been doing them remotely now and giving the opportunity. We'll present work that like hit the cutting room floor. Like, what were you proud of? What was something that you were proud of that didn't make it? And then what's something that did move through that you're really excited about that's going to come to market that we need internally. So it's like a little bit of a internal presentation that we have one of our senior creatives interview a more mid-level or younger creative to give them the opportunity to present and develop presentation skills to the entire agency. And it's fascinating too, because there are things that I don't even get to see that I get to see in those monthly like recaps that are inspiring, or you can see how a project for Molson Coors could be super inspiring for something that we're doing with Mondelez, or an approach that was taken with one client can move into how things are used in another way. So I love listening to how people talk about their work and present their work, and the way that there's a certain sense of vulnerability that comes into that also, in
Definitely.
terms of like really being open about where we are and what we do. So to back up and answer your question about how do you maintain that creativity, the basis is of how we were formed is I had a really awesome experience in college working with an amazing, talented group of individuals who have all actually gone on to do pretty well in their careers as designers or business owners, or in their certain existence. And I thought, like, why can't this exist in the business world, like where like you totally have supportive teammates that are going to tell you like, I think we should look at it this, like, in a kind way. I think we should look at it this way, or did you think about this, or have you thought, like, I always need someone else to bounce ideas off of, or at least and bounce creative off of. So that safe place for that vulnerability, like, is what I think continues to build like creative good work. And some people don't believe it until you live it, really. So it's like I think we hire some people around like, oh, that sounds great, but then when we hear it played back to us, like, wow, like, like I really feel like I can try different things or try to push myself and
Without getting scared.
Yeah, and not be afraid that it's going to be like I'm going to be totally criticized for it.
Yeah. Well, and especially when transparency is good when things start to go bad, right? Because every project, not every project, but there can be some projects that there's just these weird pain points. There's a missed deadline, something's miscommunicated, a client changes something last second, and I think if you build that transparency, it's got to help in those moments, right? It's got to help when they're like, you know what, I feel like I can reach out to you if something's not going to be on time, and I think when you start to create that, you just create a place where there's less secrets, there's less kind of internalizing things. It's more you kind of create a place where it's like, no, obviously we talk about everything, so feel free to bring it up if there's a problem. And I think when you do that, you just solve problems probably a lot quicker. Is that kind of the experience you found in making it more transparent? Has there been less problems than maybe back in the day when you were in the agency that was more probably stiff and had walls and things like that?
No.
Yeah, I think it transparency. It's interesting that you brought that up because that's something that we really push internally. When I say transparency, like our teams are, like things don't get handed off from like our strategy, our account team to our strategy team to our creative team. It's a triad, and that's really something that was really hyper developed and focused on with our executive creative director Justin Berglund, who I've worked with for 15 years, and like just thinking about like how do we create these triads that are everyone's has a role and a responsibility in that makeup, um, and how do we make sure that like transparency is spread across when something doesn't go like things can go wrong on the account front, things can go wrong on the strategy front, things can go wrong in the creative front, but like there's full ownership amongst the team, so because they're all contributing and they're all working together or involved in what's going on. I mean, everyone knows their role, so we're not duplicating efforts, but there's a shared accountability there that actually is feels less daunting then because you feel like you have a partner in crime or partners in crime when you're going into to working together. And I think it also shows that like if you can show the client how well we can collaborate, I think that they feel more open to collaborating and being even more transparent with us so that we can get there faster. We can get to bright faster.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you had said this kind of earlier, and I definitely, knowing our audience, knowing that we hear the word brand all the time. I mean, go on YouTube and look up branding, and you're going to have people even 20 and younger telling people, what is branding. And I think it's interesting because the word branding and brand has entered our lexicon. I feel like more than even when I went to art school 10 plus years ago, where I thought, I remember getting my first book and having it say, brand designer, freelance brand designer, and being like, oh, what the heck is a brand designer? And actually having to look through it, where I feel like kids now just know. I feel like when I talk to an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, they actually kind of already know what brand is. It's not foreign to them. But you having all this experience, what's one of the biggest misconceptions nowadays when people talk about brand versus how you understand branding?
It's a great question. So I for one, I think brands ever like one. I'll just start out with like brand is ever evolving. So like as we move in technology, the how a brand lives, works, and um, relates to culture is constantly changing. I think when we started our company, I think I mentioned like we were a package design agency, and I still feel like the brand that's on a package is the archetype of like our culture. So like if we were to when we learn about cultures, you look at people what people are consuming or what's in their trash, and their brands on all of those things. But branding is more as we describe it is more holistic. So packaging is just one output or expression of how of what the brand is. The brand can go as far as like it has to apply to all of your senses, right? It has to apply to taste. It has to apply to is there like your visualization, touch. So like that sensory portion of it, the brands have to be reactive to. Brands also have to have a strong purpose that is clear and articulated and sort of a need. So like a brand can exist in the world, but is it really a brand if it's not serving a need or in some way, shape, or form in helping solve some sort of human need. So like where we think about brand, like finding brands at that cross point between like, is there some sort of is there a consumer truth and is there a product truth that finding where those axes come together, and then from there explodes like, the brand has to now live in a digital world. It has to live in a retail world. It has to live in your home. It has to live in your pantry. It has to live, you know, it has to live on the bus with you. You know what I mean? A brand has become more of a reflection, or the brands that you associate with, of who you are as a person. So we've doubled down on that in terms of like focusing on emotion and what that means in our purchase driving when it comes to branding. And I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but it is related back to like branding is human. They are. We have developed. We're working on some proprietary research called Move, and what it is we're looking at emotional reason to believe. So you both are in the creative world. You know, we define an emotional reason to believe for our brand, and it's super subjective. You know, and we never really know if that's really the emotional reason to believe or not. But we do know that based on the number of studies done by scientists and professors much smarter than me, that up to 85% of our decision making is done subconsciously with our emotions. So for a number of years, I want to say going on a good 15 or 20 years, we've been trying to figure out a way, how do you quantify that so that when that is something that's taken off the table as something subjective, but that we're working towards something more meaningful. Or we could say like, we've been able to fulfill this emotional need, or the need of this brand is fulfilling this emotional need in someone. And if there's actually a benefit to it, both financially and for the again, a real relationship between brand and person. We're still test driving it. It's still with statisticians as we work through, like a number of different ways to figure out how to pull things together. But it eliminates the variables of vocabulary, so that you're responding to something that's visual without, because when you ask people what they're feeling, most people can tell you, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy. Like they're very, for people, our emotional language is very limited. But without going in too deep, it's exciting, because then you're able to, we're finding out ways that there's affinity to a brand emotionally, and how that works. So the one example I'll use is one of the women on our team said, I bought a new dining room table that I've been wanting to buy for like I wanted a great dining room table for the past 15 years. I love that dining room table, and I can't tell you why. I love it so much that I wouldn't let my family have Thanksgiving dinner on it. So like, that's a lot to unpack there, and like understand like, wow, like there's something that table is saying about you as a person, and like whether that's a sense of like accomplishment, or a sense of like, there's something more there that we could dig into and find and learn about. I know that's more of a tangible item, but like the same could be said for brands. Like, why do I keep going back to something, or what makes me want to try something different? What are those emotional sparks that are driving that those decision making pieces?
Yeah, so cool, so cool. I mean, so it's funny because yet again, even in this, you talked about relationships again, right? That you're creating this trust. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I've found in just in the years that I've worked on visual branding and brand identity is you're creating trust, right? So if I'm coming to you and I need something serious done, it's trusting that you'll get it done in a serious way. If I'm coming to you to have fun, it's trusting that you're going to give me that fun. And so One thing I've run into recently is that we each of us have a brand as well, and even if you don't think you have a brand, you definitely have a brand. It's about this consistency. So with any of us, it's being consistent in what we say and how we act, and then people can start to frame some idea of who you are. And so it's interesting, yeah, when you talk about these things of like, okay, because what you're talking about too is like not necessarily what makes a brand successful, but how do we build relationships with people we don't even know with things that we've created? And I think that's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
I say we talk a lot with our team and with our clients about, everyone wants everything super fast now, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you're feeling that too. Like timelines are a third of what they used to be. Computers may be able to move faster, but the human brain still needs time to think. And but with a brand is not a sprint. I mean, I think it's lightning in a bottle when something gets put into market and all of a sudden, bam, it explodes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not to say like I'm gonna use this as an example because I have a 16-year-old daughter, but like Taylor Swift is a lightning in a bottle. Like she's done something creatively to get the interest and being able to relate to multi-general audiences in a way that is unique and differentiated from others, and not even like super differentiated, but I think relatable in a way that makes her who she is and why she's so popular. But it's also branding is a marathon. Like it's not something that is you're going to have a quick win overnight. Like it takes time and effort, and sometimes takes a little bit of trial and error to get to the right place. Like sometimes you're a little bit ahead of your time, and
Yeah.
the rest of the world needs to catch up. Sometimes you're catching up with what's happening with the rest of the world. So it is a little bit of a race, and it's a long distance race to get to maintain and make sure that brand has continued health to keep moving forward. And you also have to be able to. There's all you also. It's hard to be the one stop shop for a brand in itself. So like there, like we partner really well with other brand people that focus on brand, whether it be digital work that they do, whether it's social or listening work that they do, the plethora of touch points that a brand can reach, even like media and advertising. Like you have to really work well with those other teams. So I don't know if it was Fitz, you or Sean that said like it has to holistically come together as one voice, because once it starts to break apart into different pieces, you can kind of see like what's authentic here, like what's real and
Yeah.
what's not. Like what is it? What are you trying to do here, and how does that relate back to like what we're doing with our brand purpose?
Yeah. With that being said, like there's clients out there who don't understand like the value of brand. And if you are like a young creative, you probably struggle with communicating like, hey, brand is kind of everything in a way where it's like, okay, if you believe in the persona, brand, whatever it is, how do you explain it to a client who maybe doesn't see the value of it? Because like there's, especially for small creatives, they probably struggle with that the most. You at your level, it might be not even the case because like Coca-Cola, they know the value of brand. But what are tips for young creatives how to communicate like, hey, this is like more than just like a logo or more than just an image?
Yeah. So one thing that we started to do earlier on was like proof points. So as part of the proposal, talk about like
Yeah.
here I'll give you a logo or we'll develop a name, but let me show you how it lives in the world. Let me show you how it, and they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily going to be the advertising or the swag that goes out into the world, but let me show you how this brand like actually lives in
Mm.
different places, whether it's like on the subway or on a tote bag or, you know, in a stadium, like where are like touch points that make sense for whatever brand you're working for.
Yeah.
So writing into the proposal that like it's not something you have to spend a lot of time doing, but just to be able to like start the conversation of, I think it helps them to see like, wow, there's bigger opportunity. I think the thing that we struggle the most against right now in terms of like proof points is I'm not sure that there's a lot of stunt marketing that happens, that, you see either really works or really like really ruins you. Like,
Yeah.
so, and we've seen that happen in the last couple of years with a few brands. And I think that because some of that more stunt marketing is like very short lived and short paced, I don't know that everyone really understands like what those little impacts are making on like again, that longevity and thinking about like the brand purpose and what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think you have two different kinds of clients in that way, shape or form, because I think that you have some clients when we go back to awards who like justify winning an award as part of their KPI. And then you have clients that are, but does that KPI really equate to growing business or growth of a brand? It's debatable, right? Like it's hard to really know that nebulous world of who, especially in design and in brand, like who there is a mindset of like that, like we are still the middle brain design of like the art and the science of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. We're really good at interrupting, by the way, on this show. Welcome to Creative Infinite Interruptions here. So I love everything you're saying. And, so something we've talked about on this show with multiple guests and ourselves as well is, you have things like Apple Vision, right? You have this idea of experiential move now in the digital realm, having more experiential things happening. And it's funny how you talk about emotion and things like that. Is that on your guys' horizon at all, that even these new technologies, VR, stuff like that, do you guys ever talk in those realms of branding? Are you thinking in those places yet?
Yeah, definitely thinking about it and where we can activate. It still is a growing part of our business. I think that we've come to the realization like it's not something that it's a hard thing to grow organically because it's so specialized. So, currently looking for opportunities to partner or acquire those services with someone that does have the rigor and the discipline. I think for me, it's a specialization and there's a form of there's a technical aspect to it that I think that I grew up in the Illustrator Photoshop world where those were the only tools that we had to use, and I didn't really get into doing much media work or any of this Web3 work. It's a little bit over. To be honest, a lot of it's over my head. I mean, I know what we need to do or where we need to go, but I don't know how to get there. So, or even the right language to use. So, like, instead of trying to pretend, I think we stay authentic to like we know how to take care of brands. We know how to like usher brands. We know how to like make brands move with culture. But again, like that touch point of in this digital world or this fast-paced Web3 and media and VR world is not something that I would say that like it's something that we're working on building into one of our touch points as a capability. But sometimes you can't be, again, like I said, you can't be everything to everybody. Yeah. So finding a good partner in a lot of cases works for us in terms of like using their specialization with ours as a partner and authentically going transparently into our client and saying like, this is the partner that really, really understands Web3 or really, really understands VR, I think that that's appreciated rather than us trying to pretend like we know what we're talking about and doing. And then, it causes more of a headache for I think for ourselves than anybody else.
100%. So I got a question there though, because like there's like a bunch of buzzwords out there, Bitcoin, AI, and all those tools are coming up, Web3, whatever. So where do you see like the trend going with like the work that you're doing currently? So what is like the the value hierarchy, basically, so that you are like, okay, I see it going this direction. This is most important right now for me. I kind of want to invest my eggs into that versus this, because like I heard about Web3 like I think like 2 years ago. I
Yeah.
didn't really see anything coming. I saw the Bitcoin thing. It's going up and down, up and down. I still think it's going places. AI definitely really big right now. But how do you see the world?
Yeah, I think so. That's one of the reasons why we've doubled down so much on emotion. So
Yeah.
I don't think that can go away in terms of,
Mm.
functionality. Functionality can be replaced in some cases by, maybe a digital experience, or
Yeah.
communication can be replaced. That a type, those are different communication vehicles, and they can be, we can move there, but like ultimately, what are like what are we solving for? Like, when does technology like become, it's almost like the cart before the horse sometimes, a little bit, is like we need these things working in tandem, and like everyone loves new shiny objects, like you talk about Web3, but like what is it
Yeah.
really doing for me as a brand is like the question. So, and when we get into AI, I think, you know I don't know, maybe a computer will be able to do it someday, but I don't know that a computer can feel emotion like we
Mm.
feel. I don't know if you guys are Star Trek fans, but like there's like an episode where
Yeah.
Data, I think he cries and he's like, "What's going on?" Like, I'm not supposed to cry. Like I'm not supposed to be able to elicit any types of. I can't read emotion. I can't elicit emotion.
Yeah.
What is that? So I think for us is why we've doubled down so much on the emotional experiences. That is something that we feel is something that will continue to be relevant no matter whatever the output might be. And
Yeah.
I think
Love it.
too, like, um, those tools of, so like one of the other example is QR codes. Like, I could have, when QR codes first came out, I was like, oh, come on, there's this ugly device that we see everywhere. Now I go to a restaurant and I have to use the QR code to look at the menu, and you know I get it, but like I think it's kind of there's a resurgence of it coming out to create better interaction between. I mean, I see them pop up on my TV ads, like, or you
Okay.
know to learn more, like I don't subscribe to the commercial-less free version of Hulu, so you'll get, to learn more about this drug, like, here's the QR code, and
Mhm.
so that there's an investment. So like, if you want to learn more, here's the opportunity. I think
Yeah.
I think
Step
we'll
in
see
between.
developments in engagement and like different ways to engage like that, and really understanding. I think that there is and a lot of people are talking about, like, there's a desire to learn more of the story. So those types of vehicles allow you to tell the story in a way that you can't do, like, two dimensionally in
Mm.
3 seconds at the grocery store, or um, you know when you're figuring out what to order at a bar. Like, so I think they're those communication devices, I think, are only going to help us in the storytelling process. And if there isn't a story, help us create a story that, again, people connect. You said it. You all said it earlier. People connect to story
Yeah.
and the experience more than they do being lectured or something being pushed on them.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, and so I guess, yeah, and I'm just untangling like the first 10 minutes of our whole podcast. But there was one point too where you said nowadays you guys have a network of contractors helping. So recently I'm now subcontracting in an agency here. It's a national agency, web design agency, and it's been very interesting, the onboarding process. Right, first off, just seeing their level of organization has been bewildering to me, how you can herd all these cats at the same time. But another thing that's been very interesting to me is, yet again, those pain points of onboarding. And so when you have someone that's working with you and you have these pain points, you're kind of there and you can kind of handle it, right? Like, if I don't know how to do something, I can come knock on your door. But as a contractor, it's been very interesting to be to that interaction of like, okay, well, I need help on this, but yet I'm also the contractor as well. So it's been interesting, those things kind of popping up in my world. So in your guys' world, as you guys have started to expand this network, what are some of the things that have been really cool to see? What are some of the pain points, I guess? And yet again, just knowing our audience here, what's some advice you would give to people if they're going to start to subcontract and work with these agencies? Because I think this is going to be more common. I think more agencies are going to follow your guys' lead and do this type of format.
I think, especially working in a remote world, so they kind of go like there's the communication piece to me has to be really clear, and it has to be really open. The channel has to be really open. So I think that the communication piece of it, that where you get in an office where you could just jump to someone else's, like walk over to someone else's desk and say like, hey, can you look at something on my screen for a couple minutes? Like that's not that. It feels like there's an extra step in there that has to get taken to like initiate that. And then we're human. So we're going to question, is this even should I even be asking this question, or is this something that they think I should know? I think that we have to be a little bit more vulnerable ourselves in understanding, like we all still have a lot to learn. I learn a lot from even the questions that subcontractors ask. So when we're starting the onboarding process, like there's no, I mean, we've heard this before. There's no such thing as a dumb question. People like to say that, but then there is some judgment that goes along with that, depending on what the question is. But
100%.
But truly, there is no question as a dumb question. Like I think if someone's curious and needs to know where they're at, even if you think it's dumb, it behooves you to answer the question, because you're being effective. You're utilizing time better. You're moving things along at a much more quicker and dynamic pace. So like we've been looking actually just recently, how do you think about KPIs in this type of environment, where what does that engagement look like? And when we're working with subcontractors or when we're working with our internal staff, like how do we measure those KPIs of like a communication effectiveness? How do we look at like the learning opportunity piece of it? How do we look at when we are able to like gather in person, like who's coming, why are they coming, and we need to set benchmarks for ourselves to make sure that we're checking in on these things. Because I think if we leave them just to like organically move on their own, like that could shape shift the way the culture moves too, even with subcontractors. So it's important for us to have a strong core purpose and core message and a set of values and traits. I just went through this exercise of like writing, like, what is our etiquette? Like we're not working in the same space anymore. So like, what is our etiquette when we're together, when we're not, and when we're, communicating over Teams, or when we're communicating over, visual platform, so like all the little things that we think that we inherently think other people know, we need to make sure that we write it down, because people don't know, or you can't assume that, I can't assume that someone knows something that I've practiced for 30 years that is, new to the business or new to the type of business that we do. So, again, there's a lot of codification. I think more so now. And I think too, like we're more so now, but some of that could also be a function of us evolving as a company too, just to, as we bring new people in, and as we grow and as we onboard, the importance of that respect that goes out to other people by allowing them to understand what those expectations are.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that question, but I don't know if I answered it.
Didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's communication, right? It comes back to that. I think that's, we have all of these tools and systems, and I think it's interesting to see, like, now I'm on a team that uses it completely. I've been on teams in the past that don't use the tools and the systems, and they don't really have that kind of regimen. And it's also interesting to see that when you start to bring in contractors, it's like you really have to have a good understanding of what your guys' process is, right? Like if you start to allow other people in and you don't know what your process is, or it's still very liquid, things can get very messy very quickly, especially if the contractors start to steer the ship more than the actual employees do and things like that. And so it's been very interesting where I've had this experience of working with companies where they didn't have a good handle on that, and it eventually would go off the rails. But now it's being in a company where it's like, there's these systems and everyone is very bought into the system. And I think that's very interesting from where you come from in, right? Because in your world, it's about buy-in on brand, right? When you have these huge corporations, I mean, that's a lot of the work. And I'm not speaking from experience. I've never branded a huge company. I've never worked on these huge kind of even package design type of things where you have to get a lot of buy-in from a lot of different people in the company. So I'm sure you're seeing that now where you have to get the same buy-in with your own contractors. Like, how do I communicate the same points to people that aren't in the company, and they could frankly leave tomorrow and get other, they can go on other ships a lot easier. So how do you, I guess my question, my form of question and all that is, have you had to change how you communicate? What's the biggest change, I guess, that your company's had to do to start to be more liquid and working with contractors? Has there been any shift in how you guys communicate?
I think just you definitely 100% more transparent. So I think that there are things that in the past maybe we didn't think we needed to communicate to the team, but like the more we are able to be transparent, the more people feel valued and accountable for getting something done. So
I love that.
um, I think and that could also be just the mindset change of like the way the world is going too. It's like people want to know the why. Like if you can explain to me why you're asking me to do this, it's that communication piece makes it a lot easier to understand. Like Jim's not just asking for this because it's going to take something off of his plate and let him be able to like you know go running for an hour in the afternoon. It's not like there's a reason why we need to move in a certain way or a certain place. And it's not always for the motive of like just getting stuff off your plate or moving things into a space that like I don't understand. So just like just deal with it. Like that doesn't fly in our place. Like just dealing with it is not vocabulary that we use in our space. I think it's there's a lot of intentionality that you have to think about, but there's also a huge amount of which we do a lot of like self reflection. And if you're going to ask a question, like, and if you really like, why do you need to, like, what is the question? What are you asking for? Are you articulating the question the right way? Or if you have something to add, how can we make sure that you're presenting it in the right way so that it's not, you're not, I mean, no one's really ever trying to offend anyone, but you're not offending someone's intelligence, or you're not offending choices that people are making. And it constantly is a dance because we're human beings, but like you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. But I think like getting people, like you said, the word buy-in, getting people to buy in on intentionality and self-awareness, like really helps the entire group.
Yeah. So I got a question. It goes kind of back to like your emotional branding. So I'm more in the video business, and I know like being emotional, telling stories in an emotional way is super powerful. But what are the steps that I can take to implement it more in the branding side? Are there like little things that I can implement, like for example on like social media, that helps me to tell more emotionally? Or what is like the kind of the process simplified for a regular person, if that makes sense, so that
Yeah.
I have like something actionable, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think as long as what we're putting out in the world relates to like real human truth and insight, I don't think
Yeah.
you could go wrong. I think where we see things happen is like, or we don't make over generalizations about certain groups or tribes or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
them. I think I'm working I'm partnering with someone about, that does is a cultural consultant. So we subscribe to a whole bunch of insights that we can find out a bunch of information about certain demographics or a certain type of person or a certain type of consumer, but they're very generalized when you actually think about it. So like overgeneralization can actually hurt you when you're trying to reach like too many people at the same time. So like if you're going to be specific and really understand what you're going for or what you're asking for, you have to be really careful, because you can offend people really quickly, especially in today's world where there's a lot of division in how we think about things.
Yeah.
But what I've learned from this cultural consultancy is like, you really have to you have to go to people who have lived it, really lived it. And that's the empathetic part of it, to really understand where you need to go. I think that there are times where we can make we can make an overgeneralization, and the one that we often hear is like, Hispanic or Mexican American or Latino. Well, like, what does that mean? Someone from Colombia is much different than someone from Mexico. Someone from South America or Brazil is a very different consumer than,
Spain.
Than someone from Spain. Yeah. Like, so, but there's like generalizations made about the culture that are, there may be some overlap, but like those, if they don't, it doesn't apply to everyone, every single person. And you could say the same thing about a millennial. Millennials are many things. They're moms, they're CEOs, they're they're not. There's not one. You could make a blanket approach about like, and it's funny because you'll see like our target is a millennial male. Well, that's so broad. Like, how do we get down to like what are we really driving for, so that when you're creating execution, it's actually more meaningful to connect to the story of the people that you're trying to reach.
Yeah. Love it.
That's very awesome. Well, I think we got a great interview here. I mean, it'd be great to have you on again. I mean, I just feel like we just touched the surface of your knowledge. But yeah, is there any place that you would like people to go to see more of like what you're talking about, what your agency is doing? Is there anything you want to shout out?
I would say that just if you're looking, if you want to test drive, if you're interested in test driving or learning more about our move process, you can find us at soulsight.com. There's an info button, and all those emails actually I get copied on, so I get to see who's like reaching out, and if there's something that we need to step into, that's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Or we're on LinkedIn too, so you can look for Soulsight on LinkedIn. There is another Soulsight in Spain, but ironically, but we're the Soulsight in the US. But yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of us. And always interested. We are forever looking for talented people to talk to. So even though we may not be hiring, we're always looking to build a relationship so that when the time comes, we know the right people to go to. So, that's one thing I would tell people that are in the business, like, don't ever feel bad about reaching out and asking for an interview or asking for an informational meeting with an agency or with a company that you're interested in working with.
Yeah, wow. Making those connections.
Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, I think people got a good understanding that your place is a pretty cool place to work with, right? Very transparent. Seems like really cool people that can have fun and relax too. So yeah, so we'll definitely put those links in the description. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for coming on. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, and if we need to pick up on another conversation, there's a plethora of other things we can talk about too. So.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome. We go. I love it. I love it. It was nice meeting you. With that being said, thanks for watching the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Fitz. This is...
And I'm Sean. Thanks, guys. Like and subscribe, and watch our next video. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.